Hello, and welcome to my session. My session is titled API Security through External Attack Surface Management. So a little bit about myself. I'm Phillip Wylie. I have my CISSP, OSCP, and GWAPT certifications. I'm the manager of Tech Evangelism and Enablement at CyCognito. I'm an offensive cybersecurity professional and instructor, a former adjunct instructor. So I've been in offensive security for a little over 10 years. Uh, IT was over 20 years, and then as far as security, I've been in cybersecurity for over 18 years. Part of my cybersecurity career was spent in application security. Uh, my teaching experience was at Dallas College as an adjunct instructor. I taught there for almost four years, teaching pen testing and web app pen testing. In my offensive security career, I've worked 5 years as a consultant. The rest of that time was spent as an internal resource as a pen tester and a red team lead for companies from consumer products to also banking. So I worked in the financial industry prior to pen testing, and as a pen tester, I've also been a bug crowd ambassador, being involved in bug bounties and that sort of thing. So learning how the different areas of offensive security work has been kind of one of my specialties and what I'm a subject matter expert on. So being able to show companies how to build effective attack surface management programs is one of my fortes. I'm also a published author. I'm the concept creator and co-author of the Pentester Blueprint, Starting a Career as an Ethical Hacker. This book came from my college lecture that I would give at the beginning of each semester on how to become a pen tester. And after the first semester I taught it, other instructors teaching cybersecurity would ask me to come in their class and guest lecture and share this presentation. I first gave this lecture in January 2018 to my class. And then by November of 2018, I gave this talk at a security conference here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where I live. I'm also a podcast host of the Hacker Factory podcast. And the goal of this podcast is to share stories of people in the cybersecurity industry as they share their advice and tips for others to get started into the industry. So this talk today, this is an area, attack surface management, especially externally facing, as well as API security, are very critical areas to be addressed. The APIs have been around for years. They're just starting to be used more because you can use APIs for mobile phone apps to interact with IoT, to use web interfaces to interact with through applications. So it was really a good way to be able to communicate across several platforms, make it easier for developers to write the backends and not have to recreate the different environments. And one of the things you can think back to is when we used to have middleware servers that did a lot of this work. Now APIs make it more simple to use. And so during this talk, we're going to discover defining attack surface management, why prioritize external attack surface management, discovering the attack surface, as well as API pen testing and the tools, as well as addressing gaps in EASM. So first, we need to understand what the attack surface is, which I figure most of you know. But to understand attack surface management, we must define attack surface. So according to NIST, it's the set of points on the boundary of a system element, or an environment where an attacker can try to enter, cause an effect on, or extract data from that system element, or environment. Another way to look at this is attack surface could be the attack vectors. So the attack vectors of your environment. So being able to define that, this attack surface is used by threat actors to gain access to your organization. And one of the things we really have to look at with attack surface management is to really make sure that we're prioritizing the offensive security side of things. Offensive security has been kind of misunderstood and underutilized over the years. I've worked for companies that the security people didn't know the difference between a pen test, a web application uh, pen test, a vulnerability scan, or a vulnerability assessment. They didn't understand the differences in it, or a red team operation. So we had a director that wanted a red team operation done against an application, which that is something you do more towards an overall environment or an organization, not on an SAP application. So this has kind of got me down the path of trying to educate others outside of the offensive security realm, because this is really a topic that needs to be understood by everyone in security, as well as IT, management, and the board, to let them understand. If they understand this better, I think it's easier for us to get budgeting, and they understand why it's important and critical. You build this into your secure SDLC, and then you're working with the development team to make sure that your web applications are being tested periodically. They may be doing their static code analysis and running DAST against those systems, but we also need to make sure that they're periodically being pen tested to make sure they're secure. Make sure the infrastructure where these applications reside is secure. You can have a really secure application, but if someone can exploit and breach that infrastructure, that's really not going to matter. So we need to make sure that everything is secured and assessed. Infrastructure is the foundation of the building of applications. So why is ASM important? It's hard to assess or secure what you don't know about. So penetration testing once or twice a year is not enough. A lot of times companies aren't able to pen test everything due to resources or time or budget. And recurring vulnerability scans are not enough either. These are things you kind of have to put together. All these things together make for more secure infrastructure, more secure environment. And 50% of the exploited vulnerabilities are exploited within 48 hours of a 0 day and being exploited. So this is a stat that came out from CISA.gov, and it assesses security from a threat actor's perspective. So the threat actors are going to look at this a different way than an individual would. And kind of to expound upon this, why this is important, this is one of the reasons that, like, the MITRE ATT&CK framework has been important. It's been a way to show defenders how threat actors think and what these targets are, what they're doing, to be able to more securely secure the environment. So this is important. So offensive security is one of the components of attack surface management, and getting to, and needing to know that whole attack surface is a serious problem. A lot of companies sometimes don't know all their internal assets, but that's easier to address with vulnerability scanners. You can do discovery scans with Nessus. You can use Nmap to detect those assets, as well as, like, Rumble is a tool that's used for internal asset inventories. You can find those assets, but once you get externally, it's a little more difficult to do this, but it needs to be addressed. So attack surface management addresses both internal and external facing systems. Both are important, but our focus is on the external attack surface management. The external attack surface is open to more people, so there's more higher probability of being attacked. If anyone's ever looked at the logs on your web server and saw all the failed attempts and different scans and all this stuff, looking through logs, you realize how serious this is. I mean, I've managed my own personal websites. I've managed websites for nonprofits and my church. And one of the things that's interesting, a church that's not very well known, that's kind of local, it's not even a nationally known or state known church, can have all these attacks. Then your infrastructure, you're a business, you've got information that's more valuable to attackers, as well as be able to monetize this. There's a lot more value there for them. So this kind of addresses why this should be a focus. Definitely you're not wanting to overlook the internal, but with internal, you've got a little more time to work on things. Endpoint protection kind of protects. We're kind of a little more limited on the things we have externally. And if we don't know about what we have out there, then that becomes a problem too. So traditional attack surface management is vulnerability scanning, vulnerability assessment, and penetration testing. So vulnerability assessments are sometimes the acronym VAPT. These are similar items, but back to the first item, vulnerability scanning is just running Nessus or Qualys or a DAS to look for vulnerabilities. A vulnerability assessment, you're taking your vulnerability scans and other tools to find vulnerabilities as well as validating those vulnerabilities, making sure that they're not false positives and making sure you're not missing the false negatives. These vulnerability scanners sometimes will miss items. And so if you're using multiple vulnerability scanners or open source tools, you're able to cover more and find more of this. And so penetration testing is a vulnerability assessment plus the exploitation. And then you're red teaming. And so I really want to expound upon that. Red teaming, the original sense, is adversary emulation. So this is going in, trying to go undetected, unannounced. Very few people in the organization know about it. You have the control team. Sometimes, a lot of cases, it's going to include like the CISO and maybe some other people in management. You really don't want to let too many people know because, sometimes the blue team might tip off their people to make sure they're ready for this because they don't want to look bad. Some people are worried that if they don't fare well in one of these type of exercises, that it doesn't look good for them. And the only way for these to work well is not be publicly advertised thoroughly throughout your organization. You want to kind of keep this quiet to get optimal effects. And also with the adversary emulation, you're also not only testing the technology, you're testing the people, the reaction times, how well these endpoint protections are working, different protections in your organization, how well it's working, how vulnerable you are to a real phishing attack. And this is outside of the little ongoing phishing simulations that ran an organization. While these are helpful, they really don't show you what's going to happen in a real world breach. So if you get a real phishing attack, you're not just wanting to keep metrics on how many people clicked on it. You want to know what happens if someone clicks on it, and then go in and remediate, put things in place that you don't have to worry so much about people clicking on malware and getting your environment infected and breached. And so purple teaming is another great area. Purple teaming, the red team and the blue team collaborate together while the red teamers are executing hacking tools. The blue team is waiting to see if they can detect those. And if they're not, they're working on detection and as well as different mitigations to prevent those type of attacks. So this is a really good way to bring up in your organization your maturity to help improve things, because you perform vulnerability scans, pen tests, and you do remediation. This takes several cycles to improve your security posture, and over time it gets better. But with purple teaming, it helps bring it up quicker. And most of these, like the purple teaming, this is kind of an internal type activity. And then bug bounties, crowdsourced pen testing, you've got tens or hundreds of thousands of people testing against one target. Could be like 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So you're more likely going to find something like that with that type of testing, concurrent recurrency. Because a lot of times with pen test, some application, web app, you may only have 40 hours to test. With these bug bounties, you got longer time. You've got people that specialize in different types of vulnerabilities. So you're more likely going to find something. So this is a good addition to your web app pen testing, that you get some continuous testing and some variety of testers out there. And, the crowdsource model works really well. And then application security and testing integrated into the software development lifecycle. So making sure that along with the DAST, the scans, and static code analysis, that you've got someone periodically going through here and doing pen test. Major changes, it should be tested after that. Something to fix a bug may not be necessary, but make sure you really define that well and build that into the process. Communicate that with the developers so they make sure whenever they're going through this process, they can schedule the pen tests so these get done in a timely manner. And so some traditional gaps. So these are some gaps that I see here and I've seen over my career. And one of the biggest things that has affected pen testing is compliance-based penetration testing. So if your company requires to be PCI data security standard compliant, then you're having these pen tests performed for PCI. And sometimes you can miss out a lot of different areas of infrastructure and different environments that are not getting tested because of compliance-based pen testing. If your company is doing your network segmentation testing correctly, then only that is in scope for PCI. The stuff around it is not. So that can get missed. So we want to make sure we're testing things that are not in scope for any kind of compliance or PCI. By common sense would tell you if you're secure, you're going to take care of some of these compliance needs. But keep in the back of your mind, different things has to be done for the compliance. But perform your pen test in more of a style that you're testing everything. In narrow scopes, you're also missing testing types, systems and whole environments. So testing types could be social engineering, physical building assessments, because you can have the most secure environment, but if someone's able to walk in, get their hands on the keyboard that someone's logged in as administrator, they're going to be able to do anything they want to do. So we've got to make sure every level is secure. And so through some of the compliance-based pen testing, some of these things have been removed. A lot of cases, a pen tester gets a subnet or a specific list of IP addresses or domain names that they test, and they don't test outside of that. So, you're missing out on some testing techniques like more thorough reconnaissance as well as OSINT, open source intelligence. And so there's time and resource limitations. If you only got 40 hours to do a pen test, you're not going to find as much as if you had, internal resource testing it for a month. So time and resources limitations are gaps there. Incomplete, inaccurate asset inventories. So not knowing what all we have, we can't test it or protect it. We need accurate inventories. So why prioritize external attack surface management? Internet exposed and highly accessible to threat actors. So this means this is more attractive and more easy to discover by attackers. They're going to want to find the easiest way in, the low-hanging fruit. Penetration testing once or twice a year is not enough, as we kind of mentioned in a previous slide. Then recurring and vulnerability scans are not enough. We're not really addressing these external surfaces well enough. In a lot of cases, we don't know what all we have in our external attack surface. We need to make sure that we're making sure this is clearly defined and we're discovering everything. So addressing attack surface management gaps. So EASM discovery, so discovering that attack surface, and this is using reconnaissance, including open source intelligence. I've performed pen tests before where it was a black box pen test. We went into the organization, was able to look up all the IP addresses that were in the network blocks and domain names, but there was a FTP server in another country that wasn't on the list. And using open source tools, I was able to find that FTP server. Otherwise, we wouldn't know about it. And this is pretty common practice. A lot of times companies will decommission applications. They switch over to the new application, but what doesn't happen sometimes is the server is not taken offline and taken down. So it's still out there, probably not being updated, running vulnerable software, and it can be exploited. Maybe it's not got production data on it, but if someone's able to attack that and successfully breach that target, then they're able to get a foothold in and get in externally. And we're talking about external attack surface, but with these external vulnerabilities, if they're exploitable, that gives attackers a way to get into the organization. So we have to really watch for these. So external attack surface management discovery. So we want to get our known items. So we're wanting to get all the IPs and subnets and domain names that we know of and do reconnaissance against those items. So the Reconnaissance Collection. So where you're looking at doing IP address discovery, looking up your autonomous system numbers, using Aaron and Ripe, the regional registrars to get those IP addresses, subdomain enumeration using tools like Subfinder and AMAS, open source intelligence, Shodan to locate unknown hosts. There's other similar products out there, even like Recon NG, and then Crunchbase for acquisitions. So business acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions. Sometimes this holds information on assets that you don't know about. So you acquired this new company and you don't realize that they have this other data center that maybe totally got missed, or it could be as small as a server or two. And so the reference to this is from Jason Haddock's The Bug Bounty Methodology, where in bug bounty, they find a lot of bugs by doing thorough reconnaissance OSINT, discovering all those subdomains and IP addresses out there that they may have missed in mergers and acquisitions data. And so reconnaissance scanning, so IP addresses and domain names, including subdomains. So you're running like Nmap for live hosts. Then you're going to do Nmap for the ports and services of the identified host, as well as identifying the web resources. So we're trying to find anything that's exposed, since we're going after APIs. So we need these web resources. We need to make sure we identify all those. And you can even run like your vulnerability scanners on this to detect things as well, not just only like Nmap. You can run your DAST scanners against those resources that you found to try to look for any kind of APIs, any kind of web resources, or any kind of vulnerabilities. And API endpoint discovery. So we've got all the IP addresses once we do our external attack surface management discovery, and we have our web resources, then we need to enumerate our API endpoints. So some good tools to do that is Kite Runner for RESTful API discovery, and FOOF wordless based API discovery. These are some tools very popular among bug bounty hunters. And Katie Paxton Fear, aka Insider PhD, has a YouTube video on my API testing automated toolbox. So this shows you how to do this in here. So you're really wanting to make sure you're automating these things once you're running, using tools like AMAS and some other automation tools, different scripts and stuff. You can figure out how to run the scripts, and then you can figure out how to automate it. And so Katie's got a really good video on how she does this. So this automation can really help you when you're shorthanded on people. Then you really need automation to kind of help you out. And we can take an example of bug bounty hunters. Some of the best out there have some virtual private servers running, that they're running scripts, constantly doing discovery and doing a lot of the things that can be automated. That way they can spend more time doing the manual testing, that's takes more skill and more time, and let the automation take care of this stuff. So API vulnerability testing. So once we discover API endpoints, there's some API vulnerability testing tools out there. Authorize Burp Suite extension for detecting IDOR, Log++, a multi-thread logging extension for Burp Suite, as well as SQL Map for finding SQL injection vulnerabilities. So there is SQL injection vulnerabilities in APIs. So NoSQL Map is a NoSQL testing tool, JWT tool for Java Web Token testing, and then Burp Suite interception proxy and vulnerability scanning testing tool. So this does vulnerability scanning as well as use some of these different plugins, extensions to help make finding vulnerabilities less difficult. And you can use tools like Postman to test those APIs as well too. So once you've got those discovered, you need to test those and look for vulnerabilities. And the video where this resource comes from is still that same YouTube video from Katie that I shared on the previous slide. So making sure you're thoroughly testing this. Once you get the APIs discovered, then you need to test for vulnerabilities. And also too, there's some of these tools listed, but use a variety of tools. So a variety of tools will help find things you may have not found otherwise. And a really good resource on some of this stuff is to follow some of the bug bounty hunters. They've got some really good tips and tricks on API discoveries and different web application vulnerability techniques, as well as some of them, like Katie sharing some of her automation tips for automated API testing, the discovery and the testing. And so vulnerability testing. So you also have OWASP Zap. It has the Open API add-on, a GraphQL add-on, SOAP add-on, and imports. You can import the files containing URLs add-on, so you can import URLs if you have known APIs. And so this is reference from Zap Proxy, how to scan for your APIs. Zap is a similar tool to Burp Suite, and is a highly recommended tool because it's another type of tool to use. That way you're getting the diversity of your tool set and finding things you possibly might not otherwise find. So the OWASP Top 10 also has the API Security Top 10. So this is a good resource. And then addressing the gaps in EASM, continuous discovery, continuous testing, so vulnerability scanning, pen testing, and EASM platforms. Automation improves scalability and resource limitations, improves consistency, and then remediation. Make sure you're doing timely and complete remediation. That's the only way to eliminate these exploitable vulnerabilities, is to make sure we remediate and take those seriously.